Man, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, dude. It's been a minute since I've done a double I swy. I do apologize because you know what? Sometimes we gotta do other content. You know, I dropped a diss track on Tim Cook. Believe it or not, Tim Cook actually blocked me on Twitter, so you can go look at that tweet and go like it and retweet it if you want. I will probably end up dropping a Tim Cook love track very soon in order to compensate for that, so he will unblock me, but that's besides the point. That's Apple news, man. We're gonna be looking at a phone, and actually the line of phone that I probably love the most, which is the Nexus line, continuation to the Pixel line. This is Google's own phones that they pretty much collaborated with other phone manufacturers to create, and the Google Pixel XL was actually the first Google phone that branched away from the Nexus line, but is a continuation. They use a different name. I honestly don't know why they did that. I like the Nexus name a lot more, but I guess the Pixel is whatever. I feel like they could have branded that a lot more, like the Google Pixel tablets and the Pixel whatever thing, the Chromebooks, whatever. I don't remember what they were, but the Google Pixel is one of those phones that I really like, and this is just an even bigger version of that. But you know, we're in the time of place where older phones are getting cheaper, but newer phones are getting way more expensive, and I feel like the used older technology, especially the phones like after 2016, the used ones are so much of a better deal, and they're more important now than ever just because of the phone prices that just keep going up and up. So we're going to be looking at the Google Pixel XL, seeing whether it's still worth it, if it's not, whatever, everything wrong with it. All the knowledge that I know from owning it, I'll branch that off to you guys so you will have that type of knowledge too. So looking around the body, it's honestly probably the worst part of the phone. I know people hate it when I say that, and there's nothing really horrible about this phone, and there's nothing like detrimental to it in terms of hardware, but just the way this phone looks, it looks very outdated. This thing looks, in my opinion, even worse than the Nexus 4, which was released in like 2012 or something. This phone is pretty outdated in terms of the looks, but don't let that get you too down. There could be some benefit to the bezel. In this case, there's really nothing. I mean, they didn't even put front-facing speakers, dual-facing on this, so I really don't know what they were doing here. Google just really, I think the best looking Google Pixel was the Google Pixel 2 XL. Every other Google Pixel just does not look that good. I don't know what Google's doing, but I really do think that the body either makes it or breaks it for you. Now, it does have a 5.5-inch AMOLED screen. It is 1440p, and it's actually pretty decent. I really like it. It's very good. It's a pro of this phone. It has around 534 pixels per inch, so it's definitely a solid piece of technology for the screen. Like I said, I don't have any problems with it or anything. Now, on the back, we do have a fingerprint sensor. Around that is a glass panel kind of thing, but the back is like half aluminum, half glass, whatever the back is made. I don't know if it's aluminum or whatever, but I will definitely say that even though this phone doesn't look the greatest, it does feel pretty premium in the hands, and you don't feel like you're having a cheap phone. Most likely you're going to put a case on it, so it doesn't even matter, but the feeling of this phone isn't really that bad. It does take USB Type-C, and it still has the headphone jack, so two really cool, crucial things that you might want in a phone looking up if you just cannot move on from the headphone jack. This phone supports it, and this phone does have a little bit of splash and dust resistance, so that's really good looking forward, especially now we're in 2019. A lot of phones that are going to be released are being released with some IP certification, so if your phone does not have that, it's already pretty much outdated. But this phone does have it. It's not IP certified, but it does have a little bit of splash and dust resistance according to the specs, so that's actually pretty decent, man. I'm not gonna lie. Now, that's pretty much the exterior looking on the outside. I kind of want to delve deep into the software for a second, which is pretty much the inside of the phone. And here's the problem, okay? This thing started off with Android Nougat, which was 7.1, and right now you can get Android 9.0, which is Pie, but here's the crazy thing, okay? In my opinion, this is coming from my experience, I'm pretty sure that this phone is going to stop at Android Pie. I could see it maybe continuing on further, but I honestly do think that this is probably the last year the Google Pixel is going to get supported. The Nexus 6P stopped at Android Oreo, so it only makes sense for this thing to stop at Android Pie. I don't think it's going to get Android Q, but don't let that take you away from the fact that there's still tons of custom ROMs for this thing, and I don't think that, I personally feel like I'm one of those people that once this phone is done being supported, this phone is still going to live on. I mean, I even look at phones like the Nexus 4, the Nexus 5, even the Nexus 6. There's so many custom ROMs out there that have like Android Pie ROMs, Android Oreo ROMs, really good ones too. So this phone is an example of that. This phone is going to live on further and further. Basically, if it's a Google Pixel phone or Google Nexus phone, it's going to pretty much last forever. People are going to keep supporting it. I think even the first Nexus, the Nexus 1, has like at least the Android Nougat ROM, maybe even has an Android Oreo or Pie ROM. I wouldn't even be surprised. This phone definitely 100% is going to last longer than just its normal lifespan. So when Android Q comes out, it's going to have a very good lifespan on that in terms of custom ROMs. It's going to be probably Lineage OS or whatever. So in terms of custom ROMs, in terms of the software on stock, I think Android Pie is where it's going to end, but it's still going to be supported in the custom ROM community. So you still have that advantage with this phone. Now, I was kind of delving into software again, some of that was my opinion. Let's go ahead and talk about the performance for a little bit. Okay, now this is kind of juicy and a little bit good, okay, because this phone had a Qualcomm Snapdragon 821 processor, a quad-core CPU, an Adreno 530 GPU, and 4 gigs of RAM. Okay, now getting the specs out of the way, what does that basically mean? Basically means that this phone, in my opinion, is still a pretty good performer. Okay, now is it the best performer phone in the world? Is it better than a whatever? No, it's not. I'll definitely say that because this phone is still on stock Android, it doesn't really have a lot of stuff bloating it down. So in my opinion, I don't really think it feels like that slow of a phone at all, and I don't think it's slow at all. I definitely think it's on the better side of things. I don't think it's slow at all. I don't know how many times I can say that. God, I'm so annoying. But what I will tell you is that the standard stuff that I usually test, the scrolling of the speeds, the multitasking, the going through everything, it really wasn't too slow. I mean, there might have been a glitch frame here and there, but I feel like that was more so software. I honestly do think that this phone is still a solid phone in terms of performing. I will definitely say that after testing like all these new Samsung Galaxies and the LGs, whatever, and the iPhone XS Max and stuff, you can definitely see that there's a humongous improvement in terms of speeds over the phones, but I don't think that if you were to purchase this phone, you will feel like you have a dated phone at all. And honestly, I feel like Android phones kind of, get slower faster than a lot of iPhones. And I know that's kind of a bad thing to say, especially on an Android video, but with this Google Pixel, I think it's been holding up fairly well, especially a lot better than a lot of maybe like Samsung Galaxies that have been released at this time. I think the Galaxy S7 was released in 2016, so this phone is definitely faster than that phone. It's either the S7 or S8, I don't remember, but so I definitely think that this phone is a very, very good performing phone, and that kind of goes the same thing with gaming. I think gaming is perfectly fine. Casual games run perfectly fine, whatever you're going to do with it. Real Racing 3, heavier intensive games also run perfectly fine as well. Really, whatever you're going to do with it is going to be good. This phone kind of does heat up a little bit though. I mean, that's kind of a common thing with a lot of these phones, so I wouldn't take it to heart too much, but just keep in mind that this phone might not be cold when you're playing games or something. It might warm up a little bit, but again, that's kind of a small trade-off, and that's kind of expected for a lot of these phones now, so I wouldn't even worry about it too much if I'm being honest. So that kind of knocks out the performance. In my opinion, I still think that even though this phone is like 3 years old or whatever, I think it's still a very, very good performing phone for the price that it's at, especially considering the age of this phone. Now, continuing on with the camera, okay, this thing has a single sensor. It's 12.3 megapixels, has a laser autofocus, dual LED, whatever you want to call it. It's a good camera. It's a very, very good still, if that's what you want to hear. I don't think it's bad at all, man. The way I test cameras, I'm not a photographer. I don't even act like I know what I'm doing. I don't even try to show off like I know what I'm doing, because I really don't. I'm just like you guys. I look at the camera quality, I'm like, is it good? Is it bad? I'm like, man, this camera quality is still pretty good. I would take family photos. Okay, I wouldn't take like family photos, but I'd take like pretty good photos on it if I needed to. If you're in really good sunlight, then you're going to take really good photos. If you're in like, I guess, darker conditions, I think that's when you might start seeing some kind of like, not distortion, but I guess like a little, not blurriness either, like, I guess like pixelated pictures, that's the best way I can call it. But here's a little thing right here. Here's a little tip. Every single phone camera does that, okay? If you're in worse lighting conditions, most likely the camera quality will go down. So it's not just observant for this phone. So what I'll say is the camera quality, I think, is still pretty decent for a phone. When this thing was released, it was praised of having like a really, really great camera. And I think that this phone is still a better camera than a lot of the phones that were released in 2016. And I think that possibly the phone camera is still a pro. Like, I don't see anything inherently wrong with it. You can shoot 4K videos on it at 30 frames per second. You can shoot 1080p at up to 120 frames per second. So that's actually a really, really good thing in my opinion. And also looking at the front camera, it's 8 megapixels. You can shoot 1080p videos on it. I'm too ugly to use a front camera. I think you all know that. So what I'll tell you is the camera quality on this phone is definitely a pro. It's not a con. I definitely think if you're buying this phone, like, you will be definitely okay with the camera quality, okay? So stop asking me about that, alright? Just kidding. Now, continuing on, this next thing I want to talk about is the battery life, okay? Now, this is the one specification that I probably hit on the most. I really don't think specs matter all that much. Like, I read them off just so you guys can just stop yelling at me, because usually I don't. I just talk about my experience, but people get mad at me and it's just kind of into my system now. But the milliamp battery size of a phone is one of the things that I wish people just talked about more, okay? I don't care about the RAM. I don't care about anything else. I care about the size of the battery, because yes, you can optimize a software to make the phone last longer, but I would rather have a bigger battery and the software last longer than having a smaller battery and the software lasting longer. And it's not a good trade-off. I would rather have a bigger size battery. This thing had a 3,450 milliamp hour battery, and in my opinion, I think it's a pretty decent sized battery. And on top of that, because this thing was running on stock Android, it optimized the battery pretty well. Now, I did hear about some battery problems early on when this thing was released, and I did hear about some screen problems too, but from what I know so far and what I tested, the phone battery on this thing is still fairly good, okay? I'm going to go out there and just say it. I'm going to put it on record. I don't think it's the greatest battery out there. I definitely do think that possibly my iPhone 10 could outlast this thing, especially when you consider, this thing is about 3 years old now. Battery has probably deteriorated a little bit. I would definitely say that the battery life on this phone is better than average. Okay, it's not like 100% amazing, but if I took my iPhone 10 battery life and just my overall usage and put it on this, I would honestly probably say there's maybe like a 5% difference in terms of like, I would probably end the day with like 25% on my Google Pixel, maybe like 30%, where I would end at like 35%, 40% on my iPhone 10. So a little bit of difference, not too much. It's not that crazy at all. I personally do think that the Google Pixel XL, even though it's bigger, has a bigger screen, higher spec, whatever, still has a pretty decent sized battery life overall. Now, some other notable things to note, like I said, this thing does have USB Type-C, a headphone jack, a fingerprint sensor on the back, which is still pretty decent, I'll be honest. I really do think they could have put on the front. I really wish they actually narrowed down the bezels a little bit, but I guess it's personal preference, it's not that big of a deal. And there's some other couple things I could have hit on too, but it's really not even that big of a deal. Another little downside is that this thing only comes in 2 storage size variants, so 32 gigs or 120 gig variants, which is kind of stupid. They should have at least put like a 64 gig variant on there. Who the heck's gonna get a 32 gig phone now? But this was back in 2016, so I guess I kind of understand it a little bit, but it is whatever. This thing also does not have a SD card slot or anything like that. So is the Google Pixel XL still worth it in 2019? Okay, this is what I will say. I think this phone is still 100% still worth it in 2019, no doubt. But what I will say though is that if for some reason the Google Pixel XL is too big of a phone, I would even say the regular Google Pixel is still worth it. Man, I did a double eye sway on that, and both of those phones, this and the Google Pixel, are probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest values phones that you can buy, mostly because not even the hardware, but because of the software. Now, like I said, the software is kind of coming to its end of life, but on both of those phones, there's a pretty big custom ROM community behind it, man. This is why I tell you guys every single day, if you're not in the custom ROMing, if you're not into that, if you think it's scary, whatever, man, do your research, but I would totally recommend that. I don't even custom ROM my phones anymore, but I remember when I did have Android phones, that was one of those things that I did all the time, and from my experience, I definitely do think that's a really, really, really good thing you should look into. I think the Google Pixel XL is probably one of the better deals. The Google Pixel as well, I think it's a little bit cheaper, but I think both of these phones, in my opinion, after everything I stated, are definitely very solid phones that you should pick up if you're looking for like a used or anything like that. So eBay and Craigslist are probably the cheapest place you can get them, so if you're looking for the cheapest prices, go over there, do your research, but I will find the cheapest ones I find on Amazon, and I will link them straight in the description below, and you can buy them straight from there, the Google Pixel and the Google Pixel XL. Every purchase that goes through those links actually helps out the channel, so that would mean so much if you guys could purchase things through there. It costs you no extra money, and they're straight through Amazon, so you guys can figure all that out, man. Links in the description. But that is pretty much it. If you have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those things are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.